detailed and its impact on the Ghanaian people. As a matter of fact, before you come in, the late Jerry John Rawlings said that the best way sometimes to measure the economy is to go to the market. We've been to a number of markets, okay? I just want to show you this. Interacted with some of the market women and the Ghanaian people who go to the markets to gauge the impact of this food inflation and the rising inflation over there. So we all have an understanding beyond the figures of, 31.7%. Make sense of these statistics by coming to your reality. Take a look.
So this is 20.
This one is 20 cedis.
The transportation is 30 cedis. And the guy who will bring it out for me to sell, she also take 10 cedis.
We say 80.
So you saw yam there. We're supposed to be in the season, but you have a tuber selling about 20 cedis, 25 cedis thereabout. Your initial thoughts, Mr. Gyamfi, before I come to Dr. Leslie.
Well, Alfred, it is sad that the rate of inflation in Ghana has gone all the way up to a whopping 31.7% as we speak. Now, you don't need anybody to tell you what that means, because what that means should be obvious to any Ghanaian or any person who understands the implications of that economic indicator. The rate of inflation is the economic indicator that measures the average changes in prices over any given period of time. And so the lower the rate of inflation, the better for the people, because then it means that even though prices are going up, they are going up at a slow rate. The higher the rate of inflation, it means that prices are going up at a very fast rate. And if you don't have incomes going up in a commensurate manner, then the purchasing power of the Ghanaian will be increasingly deteriorated and living conditions will worsen. That is what is happening to the Ghanaian people. And that is why everywhere you pass today, people are crying, people are lamenting about the excruciating levels of hardships in this country today. Hardships per se, is not a new phenomenon in our country. We've lamented about hardships from the days of Kwame Nkrumah till now. But if you go to the market today and you look at the quantum leap in prices on a weekly basis, on a daily basis, you cannot but agree that we are now in a time of unprecedented economic hardships. It's been over 2 decades since we experienced this level of hardships, this level of high inflation. And so we are not in ordinary times at all. And the earlier government set up to address this issue of high inflation, the better it will be for all of us, irrespective of our political affiliations. And I'm talking about government because, you see, they are the duty bearers of our country today. They are the ones who have been entrusted with that responsibility of managing the economy and keeping inflation rate low. And that is why we pay them every month with our taxes. That is why when they go for meetings, we pay them. Here I'm talking about the Bawumia-led economic management team and the Kenu Foriata-led finance ministry and the Bank of Ghana. They are those with the responsibility of managing this. And so if the results, as we have all considered, shows that they have failed, then they must be made to step aside for more able, more competent hands to be brought on board to manage the situation. But even before I expatiate further on that call, it is important to provide a certain background to this conversation. My brother, we're all in this country in the year 2016, in the run-up to the elections. We heard what the New Patriotic Party, then in opposition, said about the economic situation at the time, particularly inflation. You would recall that by December 2016, inflation was hovering around 15.4%. The NPP said that was unacceptable, led by their so-called economic wizard, Dr. Bawumia. And they promised to do better. In fact, he was the one they projected as the answer and solution. In fact, the panacea to all our economic woes, including the issue of inflation. Today, how come that with Dr. Bawumia at the helm of affairs of the economic management team, inflation rate has moved from 15.4% as of December 2016 to 31.7%? How come? Again, this 31.7 inflation we are witnessing today, as you may know, is the worst inflation rate we have experienced in the last 2 decades, and it is the worst inflation rate in the whole of West Africa. There are 16 countries in West Africa. As we speak, Ghana has the worst inflation rate. In fact, in the whole of Africa, among the 54 countries in Africa, Ghana is the 4th country with the worst inflation rate. How come? Now, I'm happy that the first panelist addressed the factors pushing this high inflation and made some realistic projections. And I agree with him that we are not going to, or we are not likely to see any reduction in the rate of inflation or in this trajectory of ever rising inflation anytime soon. Because even if you look at the mid-year budget review statement for this year presented to Parliament, government is projecting inflation rate of 28.5%. I don't remember any time in the history of this country, recent history of this country, that a finance minister has projected inflation at 28.5%. That means they themselves have given up on the fight to bring inflation down. It means that they have thrown their hands in despair. They are telling you and I that they don't intend to do anything drastic or significant about the rate of inflation. And that their projection is that even by the end of this fiscal year, inflation will still be at that high rate of 28, 29, almost 30%. That, for me, does not engender any hope, in Ghanaians that things will be better. And I think that is unacceptable. Now to the factors, Alfred. It is right that is what is accounting for this high inflation are mainly 2 factors. The free fall of the Ghana cedi, okay, that is the worsening exchange rate and the high cost of fuel. Now, with regards to the exchange rates, you don't need anybody to tell you that if OMCs and BDCs were importing fuel in the year 2016, at the time the dollar was selling at about 4 cedis 20 pesos, okay? Which, for instance, meant that if a business had a capital of $1 million for the importation of oil, hypothetically speaking, they needed just about 4.2 million Ghana cedis to buy that $1 million for the importation of fuel. Now, if today they need as much as 9 cedis 80 pesos, I'm told that the dollar has even hit 10 Ghana cedis as we speak. So they need about...
It depends on where you're buying
exactly,
it from.
you need about, roughly, about 10 million Ghana cedis to buy $1 million today. Then it means that in the last 5.5 years, you are having to cough up an extra 5.8 million Ghana cedis to get the same amount of dollars, $1 million. Whereas you only needed 4.2 million. Now you need 10 million. This is what is deteriorating the capital, not the profit. As for the profit margins, it has already deteriorated beyond salvation.
See,
this is what has deteriorated the capital margins of all these OMCs.
We'll get into a bit more detail, guess what, man, because you've touched on a number of things, and then those areas that you're getting into. But you see, for as long as, because you make reference to, for instance, the BDCs, we import twice the amount of fuel that we export as a country. That's number one. The second issue is that we have successfully run down the Tamale refinery, so then it's not functioning. So we are not even benefiting from that over 60-year-old facility that was put up even before we discovered oil in commercial quantity many years back. So that impact that the amount of money that the BDCs need to import is having on the city is quite glaring. As to whether interventions have been put in place to address it is another matter altogether.
There's been no interventions to address that, as you yourself has pointed out, because As we speak, TOR is not functioning. And you know, the contrary was the case as at December 2016 when we were leaving office. Because by that time we had revamped TOR and we had oil from the 10 Sankofa fields sitting in the tanks of TOR, over 2 million barrels that TOR was supposed to refine. And plans were far advanced. They came and decided to sell the crude. They didn't refine it. And since that time, TOR has not refined even, a barrel of crude produced in this country. So I know we are just making introductory comments at this stage. I'll pause here. When you come back, maybe we can delve deeper into
Alfred, you see, what makes the hardships we are experiencing even more painful is that we have a group of people in power who, instead of taking responsibility for their own mess, their own mismanagement, their own recklessness that has brought us to where we are now, always make flimsy excuses for the problems we have on our hands. Every MPP communicator you listen to today is either blaming the problem of our bad debt position and high inflation on COVID-19 or the Russian-Ukrainian war and other global factors.
But you cannot discount the impact of that as well.
When they know that the root causes of the problem have very little to do with these global factors. You see, for convenience, Miracle cited just a few countries, okay? And in 90% of the countries he cited, the rate of inflation is significantly lower than in Ghana. Brazil's inflation rate of 10%, America's inflation of 8.5%, which is coming down, by the way. Okay, inflation rate in the UK is coming down, by the way. You cannot use that to justify the point that the high rate of inflation we're experiencing in Ghana today is likely as a result of global factors. Look, I hold in my hands a publication by Trading Economics dated today that catalogs the rate of inflation in Africa. Now, if you check that list, the country with the lowest rate of inflation, in fact, they are not even experiencing inflation. They are experiencing deflation, negative inflation rate of negative 2.6%. Is Benin. Benin is an African country.
This is as of June 2022. Yes. Because I have that data. I have Benin negative 2.6.
And their inflation rate has been coming down for months from 0.5% all the way now. It is negative 2.6%.
Burkina Faso is 17.8.
Yeah, Alfred, you allow me. I'm saying that Benin is an African country. It finds itself in the Committee of Nations. It is in the globe. How come they are not being affected by the global factors Miracle is talking about? The inflation rate in Gabon is 1.2% as we speak. Inflation rates in Central African Republic, 2.7. Equatorial Guinea, 2.9. Seychelles, 3.5. Comoros, 3.5%. Eritrea, 4.5%. Tanzania, 4.5%. Swaziland, 4.6%. Cameroon, 4.6%. Niger, 4.8%. Chad, 5%. Ivory Coast, Bawomia's favorite comparator. Inflation rate is 5.4%, Libya 5.7%, Liberia 6.2%, Madagascar 6.4%, South Sudan 6.4%, Namibia 6.8%, Togo, just our next door neighbor, Togo, inflation rate is 6.8%, Somalia, inflation rate of 7%, Morocco 7.2%, Mali 7.5%, Congo 7.8%, Uganda 7%. I can go on and on and on. We are the fourth country with the worst inflation rate, the highest inflation rate in the whole of Africa. And you are here giving flimsy excuse, global factor. All these countries, are they not in the globe? Are they in another planet? How come these countries have not been affected by these global factors? Nobody can discount the fact that global factors have aggravated the push factors of inflation. But they are not the root causes. And I'm going to explain that to you. So this issue about global factors and all that, for me, is neither here nor there. Number two, he says that the structure of our economy has not changed. And so if we continue importing sugar, alcohol, and all that, our cedi will depreciate. So who has a responsibility of changing the structure of the economy? You came to office on the back of the promise to transform the Ghanaian economy within 18 months. Alfred Inobiso, is that not what candidate Akufo-Addo promised? You promised to transform the Ghanaian economy. He said he was going to transform the Ghanaian economy from the Gorgesburg economy, where we only export raw materials. And then we're going to go into we're going to embark on an industrialization drive to add value, do import substitution, export, and all that. They were going to move us from taxation to production and change the fundamentals of our economy and the structure. 6 years after being given the mandate to implement this vision, you are still here whining and lamenting about the structure of the economy remaining the same. That is an admission of failure. That is an admission that everything you said before you were given power was cheap rhetoric and that you have done nothing. Look, our imports, food, everything, check. Imports are going up. So you ask yourself, the interventions they've been boasting about, one village, one dam. Today, the agric minister says that it is only a vision. They never intended to achieve it within 4 years. In fact, the word he used was that it is a utopian vision, not to be achieved within 4 years. The one village, one dam that they campaigned on and said it was going to boost agriculture, boost production, and all that, they say it is not achievable within 4 months. What is the net impact of the small factories my brother here is talking about? Are you looking at quantity or you are looking at quality? Look at a Tuabo gas processing plant built by President Mahama. A $1 billion investment. Today it has significantly reduced our gas imports and saves us over $300 million a year. That is how you change the structure of an economy. That is how you cut imports to reduce pressure on your currency. Show us what significant investments you have made in the area of industrialization. You can put up 200 kiosks and come and boast and say, oh, I've done well. I've put up 200 kiosks. Okay, but somebody can put up just one factory. And the net impact of that on the economy, in terms of reducing imports and all that, will be much more significant than that, what you are boasting of. Number two, issues about Commander, we are importing sugar and all that. And I'm happy you asked him the question about Commander Sugar Factory. Why should we even be having this discussion about Commander Sugar Factory producing sugar in the next 10 days at this point? When they have been in office for 6 years, that plant was ready before they came into office. That plant was ready, and before we left office,
the Commander Sugar Factory was ready.
Exactly.
For production.
The plant had been completed. It had been commissioned. And we had procured a facility, $24 million facility from Brazil for sugarcane outgrowers in the area. Not too long ago, some of them came out and said, government is not even offering them the right prices for their sugarcane, and that the government doesn't do anything about the prices. They will sell to private individuals. You've sat down for 6 years, left the factory to rot. Today, go to Commander. The factory has deteriorated. And you come and sit in the studios of TV3 6 years down the line to talk about, oh, we are spending too much money on sugar imports. Now, who caused them? When you came, Tor was working. Why is Tor not working today? Now, you see, let's come home to the issues here.
While you round up, yes.
Oh, please, he spoke.
No, this was the initial conversation.
This is not initial. He spoke for quite some time.
Yes,
it's not just initial.
So you know, the initial presentation that you had is what I got him to get into some detail. This is not the end of this.
Sure. I'll wrap up just in 1 or 2 minutes. Look, we agree that a major factor accounting for high inflation in Ghana is our ever depreciating Ghana cedi, right? Today, the Ghana cedi is the worst performing currency in Africa, according to Bloomberg, and the second worst performing currency in the world, as we speak. Only the rupee of Sri Lanka is doing worse than the Ghana cedi. Are you getting?
If you take the category of best performing currencies,
yes, and currencies.
And I'm going to show you that on the screen right now because
Alfred, you say I should wrap up, and I'm talking, and you're saying you're going to show us something. At least let me end.
No, you have
that is currencies tracked by Bloomberg. The Ghana cedi is the second worst performing currency in the whole world. So you cannot be blaming this on global factors and all that. Now, aside the issue of the free fall of the Ghana cedi, then we know the cause. The reason why the cedi is depreciating is because of the huge capital outflows. Investors are taking their monies out. Why are they taking their monies out? It's because of our unsustainable debt position. Why have we gotten ourselves into this unsustainable public debt mess? It's because this government spent recklessly. Okay, they didn't live within their means. They've never lived within their means. And so they've had to accumulate debt at a very alarming rate. They've borrowed excessively, thereby leading to our public debt moving from 120 billion as of December 2016, that's from Kwame Nkrumah's time to Mohammed's time, 120 billion, to now 393 billion. Debt servicing today stands at over 50 billion and consumes our entire tax revenue. And so, because of our Bloomberg in July, only last month, ranked Ghana as the second country in the world with the highest risk of debt default, second only to El Salvador. That is why we have lost access to the capital market, because investors are afraid that we may not be able to pay them when they need their money. And so until we restore the lost investor confidence by ensuring fiscal consolidation, reducing the rate of debt accumulation, okay, reducing significantly expenditure, not the cheap political rhetoric they've been engaging in while the president continues to fly around in hyper-expensive and ultra-luxurious private jets, which has cost this country about 34 million Ghana cedis in the last 30 months. If we begin to cut down expenditure drastically, bring down the deficit, bring down the rate of debt accumulation, and this IMF program we want to join goes successfully, we can restore some lost investor confidence, and the rate of capital outflows can go down, and we can see some relative stability in the city. Until you do that, you are wasting your time. But finally, Alfred, one other factor that we have not, dealt with, accounting for high inflation, also has to do with high tax payments. Check the price build-up of fuel. Today, this insensitive government, even in the midst of these hardships, has introduced a sanitation levy, baller tax, of 10 pesos on every liter of diesel and petrol. Why? A new energy sector levy. I'm not talking about the existing ESLA they promised to scrap.
This was introduced in the 2021 budget.
Not the existing one they promised to scrap,
yes,
but increased by 30% and collateralized for a loan until 2035. Aside that, they have introduced a new ESLA of 20 pesos on every liter of diesel and petrol and 18 pesos on every kilogram of LPG. There is a special petroleum tax that has clearly outlived its usefulness, because it was brought in 2015 at the time the international market price had come down to below $50 to shore up our oil revenue for development purposes. And there was a sunset clause that when the international market price goes up, we were going to scrap it. Now the international market price has gone up from below $50 to about $130. At paragraph 20 of the 2022 Media Budget Review Statement, Ken Oforiatta says that government has made huge windfall profit as a result of that, for which reason it has increased its benchmark for this year from $62 to $94. Yet government continues to charge a special petroleum tax of 46 pesos on every liter of diesel and petrol. They are taking, finally, a price stabilization and recovery levy, 14 pesos per liter of diesel, 16 pesos per liter of petrol. And in the last 5.5 years, they've collected in excess of 3 billion Ghana cedis. The purpose of this tax is to cushion, to subsidize the price of fuel at the downstream sector. They have mismanaged all these funds.
And I showed you why fuel
prices are high and inflation is high.
The private sector, and this week, the Association of Ghana Industries actually raised questions about the impact that this economic situation is having on them, and that they actually threaten to go into a lot more imports than exploring industrialization, for that matter. That's number one. And secondly, as well, private sector players that in a number of instances that I've had to engage with because of my line of work complain about access to credit. Now, government is borrowing more locally, and so they are crowding out the government is crowding out the private sector, and it's making credit more expensive and, in fact, unavailable to the private sector to even go out there, to even get to borrow, to expand, and to lead the process of recovery. So there are a number of issues. But Dr. Lindsay, you say that there's a lot more that you're expecting that needs to be done.
Yes.
COVID, sorry. Sammy?
Sammy's bringing the solution.
You see, Alfred, the solutions to the problem, the economic mess we have on our hands, are known. The problem is that we have a group of people in government who are totally clueless, okay, and useless as far as economic management is concerned. They are not ready to do the things that will bring about an improvement in the state of the economy and the living conditions of Ghanaians. My brother, who doesn't know that to get out of the woes, government will have to live within its means and cut its coats according to the size of its cloth? Who doesn't know
that's what is causing
that government must ensure fiscal discipline? Yes, that is the foundation of the problem. Fiscal recklessness. If you achieve an unprecedented budget deficit of 15.7% like you recorded in 2020, it will create a hole in your economy because you have overspent beyond your revenue and you will have to borrow to finance that deficit. That is what has led to an alarming rate of increase in debt accumulation. When your debt rises to unsustainable levels like we have today, where debt to GDP has increased from 56% to over 80%, that is if you use the right exchange rate, okay? And where we are spending over 100% of domestic revenue on just one budget line item, debt servicing, then you need to go back to the drawing board and look at how you are spending, how you are living. This is not rocket science. And reduce the rate of debt accumulation. And more importantly, even when you borrow, invest the borrowing in the productive sectors of the economy and not consumption. We've been telling them this. They know it. This is trite. Yet they have been borrowing for consumption and for corruption and profligacy. That is all they know how to do.
What do you mean by borrowing for corruption and profligacy?
Chief, check the Auditor's General report. In the last, from 2017 to 2020, we lost 32 billion Ghana cedis to financial sector irregularities alone in public bourse and corporations. Do you know what 34 billion Ghana cedis can do for this economy? So there's a lot of waste in the system. This president has wasted 34 million Ghana cedis on his ostentatious lifestyle, traveling around the globe in luxurious private jets in the last 13 months. How can you be cutting down on your deficit, be bringing down debt accumulation and all that to do? Please, you had your time. This is my time. So the solutions are simple. Fiscal consolidation, reduce the deficit, reduce debt accumulation, sack the clueless and incompetent managers of the economy. Bawumia, the head of the economic management team, the finance minister who has proven to be an unmitigated disaster, and who bring more competent hands to manage the situation. And stop canvassing contrived and baseless excuses. Now, you see, Dennis says that, inflation in Côte d'Ivoire was 0.5% and now it is 5.4%. So if you say inflation is not having an impact in Côte d'Ivoire, you don't know what you are talking about. Once you experience inflation and not deflation, it means prices are going up. But it is the rates that matters. So if in Côte d'Ivoire with COVID-19 and the Russian-Ukrainian war is doing an inflation rate of 5.4% and you are doing 31.7%, are you not ashamed of yourself? You used to compare us to Côte d'Ivoire even now that you are in power, Dr. Bawumia always compares us to Côte d'Ivoire. So why are you running away from a comparison between Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana now relative to inflation rates? In any case, I compared Ghana to all the 54 countries in Africa, not just Côte d'Ivoire. Was this just Côte d'Ivoire you heard? How come Burundi, Somalia, Sudan, countries that have been overtaken by the military, countries at war, how come they are all doing better than you? How come? How come COVID-19 and the Russian-Ukrainian war jumped all these countries and attacked only your economy? My brother. Then he says that, the IMF has published an article in which they concede that the Russian-Ukrainian war and COVID-19 has affected Côte d'Ivoire. Miracles, when you are reading, read well and stop the mischief. Look. This is the article published by the IMF after they did the article mission, to Cote d'Ivoire, published on 15th April 2022.
And I asked the source of that data, so
and I want to read it to him so that people
have the document.
Appreciate how deceitful
what I wrote,
the NPP are.
It was.
Listen to me, my brother.
Yes,
let me read you about your
subject.
time. An International Monetary Fund mission led by Mr. Luca Antonio Ricci conducted the 2022 Article 4 consultation discussions with the authorities during April 5th to 15th. At the conclusion of the mission, Mr. Ricci made the following statement. Now listen. Cote d'Ivoire's economy, this is a direct quotation. Cote d'Ivoire's economy has remained resilient underline, in the face of the pandemic due to the Ivorian authorities' swift and well-designed policy responses. This is what they say, first paragraph. Should I read more? Anybody can Google this article and read. So yes, they don't discount that external factors have had an impact on the Cote d'Ivoire economy. But unlike Ghana, their economy has proven to be resilient. We had no economic buffers. Our economy was already heading into the ditch even before COVID struck. Before COVID struck, the cedi had depreciated by 12.9% in 2019. Before COVID struck, our debt had risen from 120 billion to 225 billion by March 2020. Debt to GDP had moved from 56% to 65%. Before COVID struck, we were doing a budget deficit of 7% in 2019. We did 7.5% in 2018, beyond the acceptable threshold of 5%. And that is why the World Bank's country director to Ghana, Mr. Laporta, said on public record that our economy was already in distress even before COVID-19. In fact, before COVID-19, you have set up a 19-member committee to investigate why the cedi was depreciating. Before the Russian-Ukrainian war, your ranking member for finance, Kweku Kwatin, had already called for investigations into why building material prices were going up astronomically in the markets. So stop these flimsy excuses. Then he says that, all the rating agencies who have downgraded us have indicated that COVID and the Russian-Ukrainian war have affected us. That is true, but what did they actually say? Did they say that COVID and the Russian-Ukrainian war are the fundamental reasons why we are in this mess? No, they said they are the aggravating factors. S&P used the words, they have magnified our liquidity problems. You understand? These factors have already so it means that before COVID, the underlying conditions of the economy was already bad. COVID has only exposed those bad underlying conditions and aggravated it. And it is clear in all these ratings. Now, my brother, we are talking about solutions. I think, and that is what even makes me sad, that it is totally unacceptable for this government to be mounting the excuses they are mounting. Because you know why? In the history of this country, they've had more opportunities and better opportunities to stabilize the cedi than any government.
What are those opportunities?
Our cedi always depreciates because of the fundamental structural problems with the economy. We all know that. But the rate of depreciation is the issue. And every government has a responsibility of ensuring that the rate of depreciation of the cedi is kept within manageable limits. Not the over 30% we have experienced from January to August as we speak. You know the opportunities I'm talking about? They are the only government in the history of this country that has had 3 oil fields. And that have had about 60% of our total oil revenues since we started the commercial production of oil. We are talking about a group of people who have borrowed more on the Eurobond market than any government in the history of this country. President Kufuor borrowed $750 million on the Eurobond market. President Mahama did $3.7 billion on the Eurobond market in 4 years. They alone have borrowed $11 billion and over on the Eurobond market. Eurobond borrowings are in dollars. So it means that they have had more dollars, not just from oil, but even through borrowings to stabilize the cedi. But because of their wasteful lifestyle, their cluelessness and their incompetence, they have wasted all these opportunities. And so at a time, the Ghanaian who was buying a bag of cement at 27 Ghana cedis in 2016 is buying that same bag at 65 Ghana cedis. At a time, the Ghanaian who was buying a bag of maize at 170 Ghana cedis in 2016 is today buying it at over 700 Ghana cedis. And the one who was buying an oloka of gare made from cassava, which is not imported from Russia or Ukraine, cassava which is not affected by COVID-19, At a time we're buying an Oloka of Gary at 5 Ghana cedis, now 14 Ghana cedis, you cannot be giving such flimsy excuses.
Okay.
You should be telling us what has become of the fiscal policies government announced to reduce expenditure for the year 2022, because indications are that expenditure is rather going up despite government reducing expenditure projections. You should be telling us what you are doing to reduce the rate. Now you are even increasing your rate of non-concessional borrowings. You are procuring expensive debts when your debt has ballooned beyond sustainable levels. Finally, my brother, this issue about the international market price of crude going, there is a deception there that we need to clear. Because you see, Ghana is an exporter of oil. We just don't import oil, we also export. So when the international market price goes up like it has gone, and in any case, it has been coming down in the last recent months. It went as high as 130 something, it has been coming down, okay? But when the international market price goes up like it has gone in recent time, Ghana also make windfall profits upstream. And
so
what
the finance
any
minister
responsible
consistently said that is insignificant. He cannot.
No.
In fact,
hold on. At page 20
of
now he has changed that narrative. At page 20 of the media budget review, he says that the reason why our expenditure is going up, yet government did not ask for any supplementary releases in this media budget
because of the windfall.
is because they have made a lot of windfall profit and they are seeking to use that to fill that gap. So now they acknowledge that they have made a lot of windfall profit from oil. And so my point is, why are you still charging Ghanaians 46 pesos special petroleum tax on every liter of diesel?
You think it should be taking off?
What has the baller tax gotten to do with COVID-19 or the Russian-Ukrainian war? What has COVID levy? Which country in the world, Alfred, in this time of economic difficulties, has imposed a COVID levy on its people? 1% on VAT, 1% on the VAT flat rate. How wicked can we be? Do we have HIV levy in Ghana, or tuberculosis levy, or malaria levy? Why must you punish Ghanaians with a disease that has devastated their businesses, their livelihoods, their incomes, and all that with a tax? High tax payments is an issue. And finally, to conclude on the solutions, like Doc said, you had 11 minutes. I've not even had 11 minutes. But like Doc said, the private sector is the engine of growth and job creation. What government must do is to provide that congenial atmosphere for the private sector to thrive. Unfortunately today, the private sector is suffocating under the yoke of excessive taxation and high cost of doing business, which is the direct creation of government. The over-borrowing in the domestic market, crowding them out like you have already said. Today, treasury bills have gone above 28% and all that. Master, we are in crisis. We are in a mess. You guys should exhibit some humility, candor, in your submissions.
Thank you very much.
Show us what you are doing to change the status quo.
Thank you,
and stop
Sammy
these
Gyamfi.
flimsy and baseless excuses.